with my less than glamorous assistant, Debbie McGee, but we're going to go over there because it seems a better vantage point.
Stage right.
I also have several artifacts which I will present during the course of this presentation. Just there. Could I, first of all, just echo a few of the sentiments which have been expressed in relation to the Summer Times, which, for many years, to be quite honest, has been a bit of a dry and dusty read, but I thought this year's was really excellent. There was something to read for all the generations, and, well, I thought there were some particularly erudite articles from David Eade, Reuben Tranter, who was a guy I don't know, but I've asked one or two of the older guys who do remember him as a distinguished academic, and he wrote very well in the magazine, so congratulations for that. Could I introduce myself a little bit? I started at the Boys' High School in 1961, and on reading David Eade's article, his thoughts just replicated a lot of the things that seemed to have happened to me around that time. I was the first in my family ever to pass the 11 plus or go anywhere near academic education. My mother is what's known as a bottom ender. She was born below the marketplace in town. She is a Constantine, so if any of you know any of the Constantine family in Scarborough, that's a relation of mine. There's particularly Richard Constantine, who was the mechanic, Richard Constantine MBE, should I say, who was the mechanic on the lifeboat. And my dad worked at Plaxton's, or Plackes, all his life. So when I passed the 11 plus from a little school at Eastfield, because we were one of the first residents to go out to that brave new world in the early 50s. I went to Overdale School, and I was taught by two people who I was actually crammed because I was the only boy to pass from that school. Mr. Bedford, the father of Bruce Bedford, who many of you will know, and my form teacher was Ivor Cutts, who played cricket for Scarborough for many years. And I was very pleased in a later life to replicate and play many years for that wonderful club myself. So, I was particularly helped by an article in the Summer Times by my exact contemporary, Bruce Robotham, who started on the 11th of September 1961. And I'd gone to Overdale. Like David Eade's School Central, we had won the Scarborough District League Football Championship with a very small school, and I arrived at the Boys' High School faced with an oval ball. And we had a new head of department, a fiery Welshman, which John Oxley will remember, Mr. Roy James. And he was absolutely rugby mad. But luckily, I had good hand-eye coordination. I could catch the ball and get rid of it very quickly. But we totally dominated that season because we had what I can only describe as a man mountain. Mr. Colin Allen Renard, who sadly isn't here tonight. I think this man reached puberty about the age of 6. And when you go to the Boys' High School and you go in the showers, we were there hiding our little diddles, as you do. And Colin Renard had a mat of hair on his chest. He was 6'2", and he had a donger hanging down below his knees somewhere. And John Oxley, the teacher on duty, had to give it a second take as he went by, and then report to Roy James that I've just seen something in the showers which I've never even seen in a senior rugby club, never mind an 11-year-old. So the ball was kicked off by the opposition. Colin would catch it. It would take 6 of the opposition to bring him down, so they were all out to play. The ball was then released. We would exploit the gaps. I think we won every game bar 1, and I can remember beating Scarborough College 85-0. Easy. it didn't matter whether we scored in the corner or not, because Colin Renard would convert from the touchline as an 11-year-old, because he had this mighty left boot and over it flew every single time. Okay, moving on. I started on the 11th of September 1961, and I've always been very interested in cricket. And the previous week was one of the most magnificent cricket matches I've ever seen. It was T.N. Pearce's 11, if you remember that, aficionados of the festival, against Richie Benaud's 1961 Australians. A fantastic match, no clouds at all, thousands of runs. There were actually 5 centuries in the match. I went to Google and just checked them back. For T.N. Pearce's 11, we had John Edrich, Peter May, Ted Dexter, and an opening bat for Essex, who I don't remember, called G.J. Smith, and then Bobby Simpson of the Australians, 121 not out, knocked off 357, if you can believe it, in the last innings, and that was on the Friday before I started the boys' high school. So there we are. A boy from Eastfield Estate in my short trousers. I went to the Eastfield shop at the cheaper end of Aberdeen Walk, that would be Southcott's. And there we were, and we met, this is Woodlands of course, Percival Alec Gardner, who strode to the stage in his academic gown and made full use of the siting of the school, sited as it was between Scarborough Hospital and Woodlands Cemetery. And I can see him now giving his lecture on cycle proficiency and road safety. If you do not adhere to the rules of the road, you won't be a candidate for there, Scarborough Hospital. You'll be definitely a candidate for there, Woodlands Cemetery. I became also fascinated by some of the members of staff, which we'll all remember. The one I particularly remember was Monsieur Lebrun, Les Brown, a fantastic, eccentric teacher. I've often fantasised what would have happened if there'd been an Ofsted inspection of the school in the 60s. It would have been a mixed report, I think, because Howard played glowing report to the schooling we had, but let's face it, there were 1 or 2 duffers and 1 or 2 lessons which maybe wouldn't have been outstanding in the Ofsted report. What I do remember about Les particularly is that he did everything in French. I was a member of 1A, which went Appleby, Baker, Bowater, Christian, Coleman, etc. Everybody had a French name, so Appleby became Pom, Baker, Boulanger, Christian, Chrétien, Coleman, Charbonnier. It got a little bit easier for Colin Renard. That'd be a Renard, a fox. We then had Bob Watson's son, Richard Watson, Watson, who became Coiffeur, What's on. Whitehead, Tete Blanche. But I was thinking, what the hell is he going to call me? Riley. Those of you who drove Elfs in the 60s will probably put it together. I became Automobile. What I do remember about Les is that he was a fantastic oral communicator. And he used to do little sort of nonsense word games. For instance, we would all sit there or stand there chanting l'hippopotame. Hannibal, le cannibal, est un animal. And he seemed to take a bit of a shine to me because I was actually mesmerised by him. He had this silvery hair, spectacles, and a really dapper, trimmed moustache, and he would enunciate like l'hippopotame. So he entered me for the French speaking competition, maybe because I was one of the boys who was able to go quite a lot. Regardez automobile et écoutez bien. So there I was, in for the French speaking competition, which I actually won, strangely enough. So there you go. Thank you. We all remember Biff Smith. Cambridge man, academic, but actually, when it came to his homeworks, I used to worry. And being what's in modern parlance called a geek, I had kept all my school exercise books. And I have here my first year, year 7 in modern money, history book. And the only time I got 10 out of 10 for my homework was for this. It's a picture of a Spanish galleon, which it took my mother 2 hours to draw. And I did take out my Lakeland crayons and do a bit of colouring, but 10 out of 10 is what I got. And having looked at the Ofsted criteria for marking nowadays, when it came to written work, I usually got 5 out of 10 brief. Date. And that was it. So that's Biff, and there are my books. We also, well, I actually had, and I have a lot to be grateful for, because I learned a lot between some interesting incidents. I had Eric Rice, Chaz Rice, Sam Rockinghorse, for 4 years, and it was a fantastic experience. But he was a little bit eccentric.
God.
I think actually, having gone through the war, like a lot of the teachers, he was actually traumatised by some of the things, and nobody dare say anything. He had a period where he would turn up for lessons wearing 5 different ties all at once. So I'm thinking, there is our teacher, he's got 5 ties on. Why is nobody going to ask him why this was? And nobody dared. But the Shakespeare in class, and we all know about the productions at Christmas, they were absolutely fantastic, so we can forgive him his eccentricities. I touched on Biff Smith's books. His physical appearance used to fascinate me. He'd cycle up Woodlands Drive on a sit-up beg wearing bike clips with an extreme parting and the biggest pile of nasal hair I think I've ever seen on any man. So that's a memory. But these guys got through, they became legends, and we're still talking about them today. But there's one particular teacher which I must touch upon, because I loved history. I had Biff for 3 years, and thought, right, I'm in the 4th year now, we're starting GCE, and we're starting a new syllabus. It was called The Great Powers, 1870 to 1939. And we had one of Percy Gardner's new appointees. He's a man called Mr. J. Hadfield. And I have here, because I don't throw anything away, the Scarborian of autumn 1964, delineating the appointment of Mr. Hadfield. He completed the 2-year syllabus by Christmas of the 4th year. And after Christmas, he'd come from Africa and he would talk to us about the migration of the tsetse fly. And people were getting a little bit unhappy. There was a boy in our year called George Thompson, who had a copy of the standard set book, which was George W. Southgate's English history. And he actually said, I've had enough of this shit, threw the book out the window. Unfortunately, it landed on the head of the caretaker, Mr. Jack Alders, who in his brown coat was rendered unconscious. 10 minutes later, after the inert body of Mr. Alders had been discovered, Percy Gardner and Jack Digger Spate entered the classroom with fire in their bellies, pointing and shouting. And Mr. Hadfield, who had an unfortunate visual impairment, went, "Yes, I've been blaming justice. There he is over there." He had a nickname, because the high school has been brilliant for nicknames. You might remember October 1964, the Nashville Teens had a hit. It was Google Eye. So he was Google Eye Hadfield. And we took the bollocking in the hope that Percy Gardner would not pick up the chalk. Because for weeks we had a team who doctored the chalk. I don't know whether you ever did this older generation, but you would get a little drill the chalk, put a match head in the chalk, tap it down, and I thought, please, Percy, don't write the homework. Percy was left-handed, and at the end of the bollocking, he picked it up, and sure enough, there was this massive sheet of flame which went up, and he was absolutely apoplectic. There's no other word for it. It was scary.